Now I just have this kind of cranked up, so we'll see it pretty quick. Now if I have to, I can always have that tool go the opposite direction as well. Looks like it came out all right. I might want it to go the other way, or even just have it go across X and then across Y. You can have it do more than one planar. There's a lot of different ways you can kind of go in and apply these. Now, for those of you guys that might have the 3-axis Pro, you can do a little bit more with these toolpaths. Oh, let's insert a 3-axis. We'll just do another one real fast. And this time, let's do say maybe an advanced rough to rough everything out, even though it's only taken a little bit. And then we'll do let's do an advanced Z-level finish on top of that. So that'll just really do walls. So the roughing, we'll just use the same tool. Depth of cut, let's make that, let's just do the full 1/8. And we'll actually modify that by telling it to do machine flatlands. It'll machine everything flat with this tool, which we can even change the tooling to a flat end mill. Step over, yeah, 100 thousandths should be fine. And maybe reduce it a little bit. Let's say 75,000. And I'm going to leave an allowance, but only on the side. I'm not going to leave any allowance on the bottom. And what that's going to do is allow me to go into finish with the machine flatlands. I can finish that floor, and then the Z-level should do the walls. And I'm using that 3/16 ball. That should all be fine. Depth of cut, let's make it 25 again. We want to do a machine flatlands to add an additional pass for the floor. Don't really need anything else there. Not too worried about lead in. Not really worried about the options or the linking. So we'll just go ahead and compute. So this is doing it a little bit differently, and it actually did a pretty decent job. So it's roughing out everything, and then it's going down and just doing the walls. So let's simulate that. So if you do have if you do have 3-axis Pro or even 3-axis standard, you can do similar things. You just don't have as much control. Now I really don't even need to do all the flats. I can tell it to only do the CAD. But that just allows it so that tool can just follow those walls, which that did just about as good. I might need to leave more of an allowance so that I'm not, yeah, that's probably what killed me. The 15 thousandths allowance didn't really leave much for the radius, so some of this is pretty ugly. I may even want to use a smaller radius tool. But really, it's all 3-axis toolpaths that you can use. You can't use anything 2-axis. And really, if you want to contain the toolpath within, say, just the cat, maybe I only want the roughing in there. Well, you can hit the E key on the keyboard to hide the emboss. And I can still use that same image. Oops. I can load that image in. Because I didn't change the size of it, I can actually use the vectorization to create a boundary. So I just find a decent spot. And then for my roughing, if I hit the I key to hide the image, I can pick just the cat or the boundary for the rough. And when I compute it, it's only going to be inside of there. So you do have some flexibility of how it goes through to finish on this. Let's just reduce that tool down a little bit. change the radius of the tool. Yeah, it looks like it's trying to do a little bit on the outside, so I might want a boundary for that as well, which I could use the same vectorized image for the boundary. Now, there was a lot of extra material because of the tool size change. So I'd probably want to do, maybe an equidistant or something so that I can get the bottom, the wall, the floors and everything done in there, and then use a boundary to contain it inside of those. But you kind of get the idea. All right, so now there also is, before I move on, when you're doing the emboss, I did an add. If I need to invert this, I can tell it subtract. And it will just be the opposite, where the lettering will be standing up and the white will be in the background. So when you're looking at an emboss, it's taking the contrast between the colors to generate it. So what you're really wanting to do when you're looking at an image is to find a high contrast image. So let's take a look at some image types real quick. We're going to open some browsers here. I'm going to get some set up here. Okay, so the first one we're going to take a look at is Grayscale. Now, Grayscale is not just a black and white image, not news, images. And now Grayscale is really important. However, you'll notice that there's contrast all over. And the way that BobART is looking at this is it's taking a look at the white and the black and different levels of shades in between those, and then giving it depth. So grayscale is not a term enough alone. So what I mean by that is you need to have height map. When you add height map to it, you're actually getting images that are specifically made to give depth. I'm getting some other ones set up here. So there's three main image types that create depth. Grayscale height maps, which let's see if we can find something in here that might be, might come out well. That's actually pretty decent. Let's go ahead and save that image. And I'll just throw it into, I'll just throw it in here. And it's a JPEG. I just want to make note of that so that I know. Now we're going to go back to BobCAD, open up a new file, and we'll emboss that image. Need to go back a folder. Now, I don't know how this one's going to come out because obviously I just pulled it off the internet. I'll do an add, same thing. And a lot of times when you're doing a grayscale height map, you really have to know the height it's supposed to be to give you the details, because right now it's not giving me any details. I get a little bit of the wings, but not a lot. So you really do kind of need to know how tall it needs to be. Like if I jump to a 1/4 inch, I'm getting more depth. I'm getting more detail in the wings. I'm getting more detail on the globe. Really, I found most of these are somewhere around 1 inch, at least. So then that gives it a lot more depth to that logo. It's actually got texture to it. And if I don't want that texture, I just add a smoothing. I don't even need to select anything. I just regenerate. It'll help smooth that out, which it didn't do much of a change, but there was a minor change. The other thing you can do that can kind of help out with the final emboss is if you right-click the emboss model and go to Create Modify Stock, you can change the resolution. So right now it's at the 71. It lowers the resolution based on the size of the image so that it's easy to handle, so it actually can process things quickly. You can dial everything in, and then you come in the end and then increase the resolution. When you increase the resolution, you will need to regenerate. It will take a little bit longer. If I didn't just overtax everything with the GoToWebinar and everything loaded. But now it's just got a higher resolution to this image. Didn't really get much more detail, and I could probably reduce the height a little bit, but you kind of see what's going on there. So the grayscale height maps, they're a great way to create that depth. And if you use software like Blender, Blender is a free graphics program where you can create images and things like that. They have a bunch of free tutorials online. It's a free program unless you make money with it, and then I think you have to buy a license of some sort. But I know a lot of people are using Blender because it is free to create these things. Now the next image type I wanted to show you is normal maps. Normal maps are made for textures. That's what they're kind of made to do. And they even have seamless textures. So if some of these you have to license them. But if you use things like Blender or Maya, things like that, you can create your own textures using the same thing. Now, normal maps are what's used in 3D design and game design to create textures. It's an image that just generates, based on the contrast, it'll generate the texture, the depth. So if I find something in here, let's do, and that one doesn't look too bad. Let's try this. Save image. I'll save it to my textures folder, and it's called Step 10. Okay, so apparently I cannot download that one. So I won't. Yeah, that one doesn't look too bad. Let's see if it'll let me save that image. Weathered wood. That one won't let me download it either. Interesting. Let me try using a different type. Let's just go back. Oh, it's a really small one, but let's see if it... Okay, that one let me download it. It's weird the other two wouldn't let it download. So normal mapping is the name of this file. I should have looked at the type of file too, but that's all right. Change it to all files. There it is. Now this one's pretty small, but I could use this one as a texture. So I'm just going to emboss it as is. Go into kind of an isometric view. Now it kind of brought it up in a weird way. So let's try changing the height. Let's change that to 1/2 inch. This one doesn't quite act the same as the grayscale height map. So normal maps are good for like a low profile texture. You really want a good high resolution image to get it to work. And then finding that sweet spot for the depth. these can be kind of finicky. I use them mostly for textures, like in the background of something. Now, the next and last image type that is very handy when you're dealing with BobART can also be created through Maya or Blender or any of that good stuff, is Ambient Occlusion. So Ambient Occlusion is essentially a shadow. It's the absence of light. It's there to create depth within a scene. So what's nice about this is because it has the high contrast and it's using that kind of grayscale to generate it. Let's even save this one, if it'll let me. That one let me, so let's try that. Some of the best images I've used for BobART were Ambient Occlusion. They come in really clean. Same with the Grayscale height map. Normal maps are, every now and then you'll get a really good one for a texture, but it's not often. Emboss from image. And this one's pretty small as well. We'll just see what it looks like. But that gave me a really crisp emboss. Let's see if I can increase the height a little bit. Gives me a lot of depth. And if I kind of rotate to the side, things are proportionate. They look right. You know, kind of. Her nose is a little sunk in, but that's, again, just finding that right depth for it. The ambient occlusion usually come in extremely well. One of my favorites that I found over the years was, there's a fruit bowl that I found. Where is it? There it is. You can tell I have a few of them in here. But this one with really no settings comes in super clean, lots of depth, lots of detail. Mill's great. You know, there's really not much better images you can get out there. So if you can use these, if you can create images using Blender and Maya and those 3D programs, you can absolutely go in and create your own images for this. You know, I've had people that have taken photos and then created depth maps from it. We had one guy that was doing mountain ranges. People would climb a mountain and he would get a grayscale height map and actually mill out little mountains for like little trophies. Then I'll just do the straight old planer. Let's give it a 1/4 inch ball. And I'm not too worried about the rest of this. Maybe add a lead in here. So there's my planer. Let's see what this one looks like. And then you can see that came out pretty well. I might have to do a little tighter step over, but it doesn't get much better than that. All right. So again, you have grayscale height maps. Insanely handy. Like I said, these are really, really good at like mountain ranges, things that typically have a depth within the intent is to show the depth. They do even have other types of height maps that you can get. But I found that the grayscale height maps generally work the best. This image shows different types of height maps. The normal map and the grayscale are typically the cleanest. Then you have your normal maps, which again, mostly textures. And as you saw, a bunch of them didn't let me download them, so it's kind of few and far between. You have to find the ones you like. Then we'll take a look at actually utilizing one of these. Maybe we'll throw it into something. But typically, that's the image type that I've used the most. I use it quite a bit. But like I said, it's all pretty much textures. I'm trying to see if there's a decent one in here, but I don't see anything that really stands out. And then last, those ambient occlusion maps, of course, are always good. And because of the way that it's generating the shadows that would be cast, that's what's generating the image. And there's a lot here, but again, most of these you're going to have to try to create yourself. Like I said, Blender is a free software that you can download and create these. There is quite a bit of a learning curve. I personally have not used it myself, but I plan on doing so whenever my desktop at home is done being built so that I can do it. All right, so we're going to use some of these different functions kind of together, and we're going to do a multicolored image for the vectorization. Now, like I said, there is a little bit of prep when you're doing multicolored images. So let's go ahead and close some of these. And you know what, before we go too far, I'm going to restart my BobCAD. It is a good idea that when you're done using it, close it, especially being connected to GoToWebinar. It can be a drain on your resources. All right. So let's do a multicolored image, and we'll look at some embossing with it. So I'm going to go to BobART. I'm going to go to my load image under images. And again, I'm right-clicking on that to get to the menu. And then I'm going to go, should have, if I can remember what it's called, the koala on the tree. I did rename it. All right. So I like to use this image just because it is a good high contrast, bold colors. It's very easy to see each color that's in this. They're easily discernible from the software, so it's going to be easier to pinpoint down each section. However, when you go to vectorize, obviously I don't want to do the black and white strategy because that's going to get the entire thing, and we don't want that. We just want certain parts. Now, if you notice, when I go to multicolor, it's already set to 7 colors because it sees 7 defined colors within this drawing. So if all I wanted to get was the black, I'll hit OK. And then if I hit the I key, that's all I have on that vectorization. Well, if I go back in here and I tell it, well, I want to also get the green. I want to do a separate vectorize. It deletes out the old one and brings in the new one. So what you need to do is you have to create a layer. Let's call it green. You'll want to then copy the geometry that you vectorized. So you have to go to select mode, select everything. You'll go to create, you'll go to home, and you'll go to copy, and then paste. Because the green layer has the check mark on it, that's the layer it's putting it on. I hid the CAD layer, so I'm just looking at that one. So if I move my check mark and I hide the green layer, I can go back into vectorization, cancel select mode, and this time I'll tell it I want the black. Since it got rid of it last time, I'll bring it back. Now if I show the green layer, I still have that there. So again, you want to add a new layer. I'll call it black. I'll go to my select mode, select the geometry I want, and you can even hit Control-C and then Control-V on the keyboard, and that will copy and paste. Again, that's Control-C is in cat, and V is in Victor. So I'll go back to vectorization. Maybe this time we'll get the brown. Actually, you know what? Let's do, trying to think of the order I want to do this in. Let's grab the pink. Now I'm not going to do the entire thing. That would probably take the rest of the event. I did want to show you guys some applications of some of those other vectorization or the emboss functions. So we'll be jumping back to some more of the embossing here in a second. Now I don't know which gray I want. So there's a light gray and a dark gray. The light gray is going to give me one result. The dark gray is going to give me the other. So let's go ahead and make our layer for the light gray. Oh. Now some of these are going to have very similar geometries, but I'll show you they're actually not the same. For instance, the black also has some of the light gray in it, but they are slightly different. They are actually off from each other. And typically it's just easier to single things out, so you'll have the entire color on one layer. So we'll do dark gray next. Now you can't add the layer and it vectorized to that layer. So what I mean by that is I have the check mark on the dark gray layer right now. If I go to vectorization and I change that, it's going to vectorize that, but it only vectorized it. Oh, it's making me a liar. Did they update this? I have not tried it in 34, so let's add a new layer. Let's call it white. If they did, this will make this so much easier. So that you guys that are on 33 and under, you're going to have to copy and paste. I know that for a fact. I've done that a couple months ago, and you'll actually, if you go back to some of the recordings of these, you'll see that I had to do that. Yeah, okay, they updated it with 34, so now it's actually vectorizing to the proper location, proper layer. Just good to know. What other colors do we have in here? Let's move this back up. So we've gotten the dark gray. Oh, we need the brown still. Light gray. We've gotten everything except for the brown, which is fine because now I have it on this one. So now we have all of them laid out in different layers. So what does that do for us? Well, what that's going to do is help us with vectorizing, or with embossing. So let's go ahead and let's see here. What do we want to bring in? Now there's nothing on the dark gray. So maybe I did, or the white. Okay, so you do have to copy and paste it. It didn't do it like I thought. So that's good to know. So we'll redo the dark gray. I was going to say, I didn't think that got updated. There we go. Now it's in there. And I really don't need the white, but I'm going to do it anyways. Just checking each one of these, making sure they're all all right. Should be good to go there. And we'll get our brown back in here. No, and really, I've always wanted to change this a little bit, change this drawing a little, but I know it's going to take too long. Because what I would probably want to do is essentially get rid of the internal shape of the koala on the dark gray layer. And the reason I say that is this is just going to create a boundary. But if I got rid of everything internally, we could make this a more or less of a like a platform to emboss from and then add to. We just raise up everything. But I'm not going to go through all that trouble right now. We'll kind of speed through doing a couple of embosses here. And really everything is embossed regular. Now the model size, the stock parameters, I don't know. So what I want to do is just hover my mouse. Let's go ahead and turn the white layer on since it's the outside. And I can actually go in and evaluate. Let's just do a measure 1. That is my dimensions right there. So I can set up my stock based off of this. So we'll go to BobART, Emboss Model, and we'll go to Create Modify Stock first. So my X is going to be 18.9217, and my Y going to be 28.5083, and that sets up my stock size. Now I can right-click Emboss Model and go to Emboss Regular. So let's do this as a convex ellipse. We'll do something kind of small, and we may change the size of these, but I'm going to leave the default sizes and everything first. And I'll change the color so we know which one it is. We'll just pick a grayer color. Let's just do this. We'll do that black. So it doesn't do anything when you initially start. We need to go in and select our geometry. So right-click Geometry, just like you would in Toolpath, and go to Reselect. And we're going to hold Shift. And I'm just going to pick the outside. I'm not even going to worry about the inside of this one. Not even going to worry about the inside of the ears. We're going to leave that alone. We'll see if we want to manipulate that a different way. So now I can right-click Emboss Model and regenerate. So that's going to give me that little border, that little outline. That looks pretty decent. Let's turn on the light gray. And I can hit the E key at any time to hide the emboss. So if I need to just see what's behind all this, I can. So I'm going to do another Emboss Regular. This time let's do it as a convex arc, and I'll change the radius down to 1/8. Again, I'm not changing anything else, and I'm adding. So now I want to right-click Geometry and hit Reselect. I'm going to pick the main body. Oops. Hope if I hit the right key. I'll select the pieces on the outside. And I'm going to stay away from the inside of the ear for right now. So that's my selection. I'll right-click Emboss Model and hit Regenerate. Now let's go ahead and change the color. Let's change this one to like a light gray. So we can kind of see what's going on here. Let's go to an isometric view so we can see some depth. So it's starting to look all right. Let's go ahead and add some of the facial features here. Do I want to do that? Let's do the ears real quick. Now, depending on how you set things up, because you can create depth in different ways. So I want to go in and do a subtract in here to create the little ear section. So let's turn on pink. I'll hide the light gray. We'll hit E just to show it what we got here. We'll do another emboss regular, but this time I'll do it as a convex ellipse, but I'll do it as a subtract. So it'll be a nice subtle subtract. And we'll change the color to a pink. So again, I right-click geometry, hit reselect, hold shift and pick my geometry, right-click and OK, and then regenerate. And hit the E key on the keyboard to bring back the emboss. So that's created that little 3D kind of relief dipping down in there. Now I can add the kind of white fur to that section. So if I turn on white, that should have, that doesn't. One of these, there it is, has some of the tufts of hair there. That's the one I want. So I'll do a emboss regular. Let's make this convex ellipse. I use a lot of ellipses for just a nice subtle radius. We'll hold shift and pick our profiles and then regenerate. So now that's added it just to that little section. Now I know it's pretty hard to see the depth and everything that this has, but there is a little bit of depth to it all. Let's go ahead and change the color of these. Go to white. And just like toolpaths, when you click on one of these features, it's going to highlight what that is selected, what it is, and just kind of point that out a little bit. Most any embossing you're going to do is really just going to be an emboss regular. There's not a lot of variation to it. I'd say 99% of everything I've done, besides, unless it's doing an emboss from image, when I'm doing actual embossing, it's practically all emboss regular. I don't use any of the other features too often. Now, I did say I wanted to, we'll spend a little bit more time on this one, we'll maybe add some more of the face. So I'll do another emboss regular, convex arc. We'll pick the, now I may want these even on different stages. I might want to do the eyes recessed with this little part sticking up, the iris and the eye sticking up. So I'm going to do an add on the nose and mouth. It just adds those in there a little bit. And then I can tell it to do a subtract for the rest. We'll do a convex arc, but I'll make it a 16th radius. And I need to make it a subtract. Now we'll change the color. The colors really don't mean anything. It's just there for a visual. So that's going to recess in there. Then from that, I can add in the iris. You can kind of piecemeal this and step it in. Now this one I'll do as a line. So I might have a 1/16 of an inch line, and then height, and even the angle I can change. I might make that 75. So it has a little bit of a taper to it, but it's not vertical. And we will add. So if I reselect, again, I'll hit E to hide my image. Hide the emboss, I should say. And then that adds that to the inside. And you would mill it the same way. You'd still use the 3-axis mill, still using planer. But it should be stacking these on top of each other. So it's pretty much always relative to the previous emboss that you had, if they're on top of each other. Like these are all on top of each other, so they're from those shapes. You can adjust the height. So for instance, like if I wanted to have the nose sunk down a little bit, but the mouth sticking out, one, I would have to separate them. But let's just go to that add. If I change the base height, let's say I want to bring this up a little bit. If I bring it up to 125, it's literally raising up out of the feature. So if I go down, say negative 125, you can see it's actually even made like a little crease around the edge. Like I said, this is mostly everything you're going to do with embossing. There's really not a lot to it. Now, I do want to grab my DXF ClipArt book. We're going to go through kind of using some of these other ones. Not all of them, but a couple of them. So bear with me one moment. I will be right back. I got to go grab my book, and then we'll continue. All right, I am back. So let me find something in here. We'll find something not too simple, but simple enough. I don't want to go too crazy. All right, so this is section 28. Number 3, got it on my DXFs, and I'm looking for number 21. All right, so I've just got a basic frame. This is just right out of our DXF ClipArt book. I haven't done anything to it, just pulling it out as is. Now I'm also going to vectorize. We're going to use pretty much every part of BobART with this. So normally what I do is I'll just create multiple layers. Because I know the BobART vectorization is going to go to this first layer, I'm going to add a new one, and we'll call this frame. So this frame is going to go on that layer. Now, if you have 34, there is a nice little handy button, move to current layer. That's the checked layer. So if I click that button, it is now only on that layer. Just one of those new things that they added this time around. Now I also want to bring in that Bobcat image. Let's just use that again. I do need to get a cleaner one for some of this, but that's all right. We'll vectorize it. That should be pretty good. Let's just increase the accuracy of fuzz. It's not too bad. I'm not going to worry about cleaning it up. I know we did that a little bit this morning, but all right. So now I have them in two different layers. So I can blow one up. I can shrink it down. What I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink down the Bobcat and put it inside of the frame. So we're going to go to Utilities, Translate, and I'm going to pick everything. And actually, let's do one thing real quick, because this is never going to come out very well. Just select that and delete it. We'll go to Translate. Now I want to select everything. And then I'm going to turn the frame layer back on. So I normally just grab it, kind of move it centered-esque in wherever I'm putting it, and then go in here and scale. Now there is a slider for scaling. I don't happen to like using that too often. There's a snap increment applied to that. You can turn the snap increment off, and it should allow you to just scale to whatever. Now I turned on the scale from center, so I can kind of eyeball the center of the part, and that geometry is not going to move anywhere else. It's going to just sit right in the middle there. I could also give myself some construction lines to actually find center so that I'm actually translating off the center. But you know what? Let's go ahead and do that. I think I like this size. Maybe just a fuzz smaller. Yeah, that'll work. So before I finally finalize it, I'm going to put it off to the side, right-click, and hit OK. I'm going to give myself some construction lines here. So I'm going to go to Create 2D and Line. Really, I only need one. That'll have to help me find center. So if I go to Utilities and Translate now, window pick what I want. We'll turn off the scale. And then if the translate is way out in space and you want to just get it back to where the geometry is, just zero the first amount here. As long as you're on geometry center, it'll just put it right back, and then you can go in and snap to that line. So we look good there. Let's go ahead and delete this extra line. All right. Now, I got this frame only because I was going to use some two-rail sweep, but there's really not a lot that I really need to do for a two-rail sweep on this one. We're going to try to use it anyways. Now, I do want to move all of this down here. And the reason for that is so that when I go to vectorize, when I go to emboss, the embossed image stock always starts here. That way I don't have to move it. It's harder to move that stock than it is to move your geometry. Way easier to move geometry. So we'll go to our BobART tab, right-click Emboss Model, and we need to create stock. So actually, before I do that, let's find a size. This thing is going to be roughly 5 by 8. And if you're not aware, I am just looking at the readout of the XY. As I hover over an area, I can see the readout. That should be good. All right. Now I might want to do, let's say, two-rail sweep. Now, two-rail sweep, you're going to have a couple of things. Well, first off, you're going to have two rails. Those two rails are determining what you're putting in between your two rails. So let's go ahead and hit OK. Don't really need to do anything there. There's this cross-section geometry. So rail 1, we're going to right-click and hit reselect, and I'm going to pick the outside. Rail 2, I want to pick these roughly in the same area because they are going to have an arrow. If you notice, there is an arrow setting direction. They're both roughly in the same location. That's very critical. If you don't have that in the right spot, it's not going to give you the two-rail sweep correct. And then let's go ahead and just generate a spline, do something kind of a little more organic. Now this is obviously wider than this slot here, that channel. But we'll see what it does. So there is a direction for all of these. Just make note of that in the back of your head, and that those directions do have to follow a specific path. Now you'll see it did the 2-rail sweep. It took that geometry and put it between the two that I have, but it's kind of cut short and it's not embossed the same height all the way around. So we're going to go in here and edit. There's a few checkboxes. There's the transition type, and that's really what is going to throw everything off. So if I say use 3D rails, I don't think that one's going to change anything. And it didn't. It actually literally changed nothing. And I honestly can't remember what each one of those does. I usually just go through until it looks right. So the sync rail nodes, you'll notice these corners are now proper. And it is technically the right height. So if I edit, you can also just scale cross-section based on width. It's scaling the geometry I gave it based on the actual width of those two geometries. So if I had picked geometries that were further apart from each other, it would have actually blown it up bigger. I actually want to change my Z scale. Let's say 0.75. So what's going to happen is it's going to bring this down in Z. So you do have a little bit of control even if your cross-section is not perfect in the height. All right. So now the middle, maybe I want to add a texture. So let's go ahead and emboss, and we'll do emboss from Emboss Texture, and I'll do from image. So you can't really define anything yet because we don't have the image selected. We don't know what's stamping and all that. So I'm just going to get it and go ahead and hit OK. We need to first select an image. So let's go ahead and go to my textures here. Medium icons so I can see what they look like. And let's do all files because that's going to give me more. I want to say some of these, like this wood seamless, I think comes out pretty decent. Then the boundary geometry. So I want to right-click boundary geometry and hit reselect. We'll hide the emboss, and I'm just going to pick this guy right there. That means everything on the inside is going to get this texture. So now I have that wood grain texture going across this frame. And that actually came in really good. I'm happy with that. Now, if I go ahead and do an emboss on the Bobcat stuff, maybe I want to add that as a nice emboss on the top. Maybe do a convex ellipse. Hide my emboss. Let's go ahead and reselect geometry. Now I'm going to omit that guy. I want to actually bring that up, and then I'll subtract the I out of it. But I am going to pick all the letters. And it's going to look pretty bad for the letters because, again, this image is not the greatest. But I use it for just that reason. All right, let's bring our emboss back. Regenerate. So it's applied the texture to the letters. And I don't really want that. So when you're going through, you have to kind of think about what you're embossing and what that's going to do in the end. You know, in a lot of cases, this would be fine, and a lot of people would want this. I know one of the shops I was at, we did stuff like this all the time. However, if you want it to be just solid letters, maybe I actually want to do it as maybe like a split up. Yeah, let's actually split this up. I'm not going to pick any of this stuff. We're going to do the lettering different than the cat head. All right. Now the geometry, the boundary geometry for the texture, I want to add all of this. And I want to add the inside of these letters, because if I don't, it's not going to put the texture inside of them. If you think about it as a pocket, it's essentially what you're creating here. So we'll regenerate all that. So now I have a nice clean emboss there. Let's go ahead and modify that slightly. Maybe I want to do a different ellipse. Maybe the major and minor axis I change a little bit, so maybe 250 major. Let's see what that looks like. That softens it up a little bit. I think I like that a little bit better. Let's go ahead and subtract the eye. So I'll do an emboss regular. We'll do a subtract. And we'll do this as a convex arc. We'll just make it maybe a 16th. Looks pretty decent. Now the lettering. Now what's cool is you can even add in like a V-carve toolpath to all this and have it just V-carve those letters. And a lot of people do that. You know, a lot of times that's kind of what people are going for. So actually, let's go ahead and do that. We'll deselect all this stuff again. Regenerate. So it's just the wood texture with the cat head. Now I'm going to go to Emboss Model and create Modify Stock, and we're going to remove the non-embossed area. By doing that, it's going to get rid of everything we don't want in the scene. All right, so let's go to our CAM tree. Go to New Job. All right, so our stock, let's make this, I don't know, let's make it 1/2 inch. I'll move my Z up just a hair. So we're taking some stuff off the top. And my origin will set on the top of the block. So now I may want to do a mill 3-axis over the whole thing. And a lot of times what you'll have to do in these cases is just a standard planer. Let's go with a 1/8 inch ball. We'll do 90 degrees, should be fine. Actually, let's do 0 so it goes along the grain of that grain texture. Step over, we'll make that pretty small, like say 20, 30 thou. No allowance. Bottom of job. I'm probably going to need to use this, and I'll show you guys why here in a second. And I know this isn't really the 3-axis day, but there's some important tips. So we're going to hit compute on this. And what's going to happen is that toolpath, when it gets to the edge of the part, the tool is going to stop. Actually, it went all the way down. Perfect. I kind of wanted it to do that. Just making sure that it would. Now, I don't want it to go this far down. So, if I go into planer, I can come into bottom of job and say -1/4 inch. That's the max that it'll go below. Now, it only got rid of a little bit of that, but it just helps me to know that it's not going any deeper. It's not going to cut through the part. And this one might be one that I have to go two different directions. Actually, that end mill kind of the perfect size, so I don't think I will need to, but so now I got to kind of figure out the depth that it just did to get to this wood grain texture. Now I'd need a tighter end mill, a smaller end mill to get a better detail out of that. And if any of you guys are on 3-axis Pro, you can use tapered end mills and all sorts. 3 standard, you don't have those options. We'll reduce the tool size down a little bit. Okay, so I need to figure out what the depth was that it took to get to that surface. So what I normally do is I use this bottom of job. So I've gone down -1/4. I know where that is. I'm going to make it 125. If I start to see that it doesn't even reach this floor, then I know that I'm in the right area with the size. So an 1/8 inch looks about right. It's not going any deeper right now. So that's telling me that this surface here is about 1/8 inch from the top of the stock, roughly. I don't have a good way to measure that. It's not a solid. I can also see the cat head is kind of underneath it. So I want to raise that up a little bit. So let's go back over to BobART. We want to go to the add. And I'm just going to make the base height 100 thousandths because I believe that's what our texture was embossed to. Doesn't mean it's not over that, but so that added it and kind of added a lot more than I wanted. Let's go back in there. We'll make it 30 thou. Just until we get it kind of nicely met up with the surface, which I think that just about did it. If you have geometry that overlaps, if I did a boundary that overlapped this thing, we could do merge high and merge low. Again, I don't use those too often. Really, it's just emboss, regular add or subtract 99% of the time. So we're sitting at about 1/8 of an inch down from the top of the material. So let's go to machine setup 1. We're going to add in a V-carve. And I'm just going to pick all of the text. Now I'm not going to worry about the depth. We're just going to have this do the V-carve and cut it to whatever size it gets. Now the one thing I do need to do, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, is change the top of feature. I need to make that -125. That way it knows the new height. So we're doing V-carve finishing. I'll just keep the 1/2 inch 90 degree. And I don't really need to do anything here. Depth of cut, 1/8 of an inch, that should be fine. It's going to do whatever it's going to get to that V on all those geometries. So we'll just hit compute. Looks like it calculated pretty well. And the one way to tell if we're inside of the material is turn the emboss on. It looks like it's doing a great job. And if I look at the bottom, it's tracing those lines pretty much right up to the texture. So I'm at a good spot with that 1/8 inch. Now, I went a little smaller with the end mill, so we should get more of the wood grain texture out of this. I might need to do a tighter step over though. Yeah, we'll see what it looks like in the end. And in a few minutes, we're going to break for Q&A. So if any of you guys have any questions, you're more than welcome to ask. We're here till 3. If there's no questions, we'll probably break for the day a little bit early. And we do send out a survey after this is all said and done. So you guys could fill that out, and when we send it to you and get it back to us, we greatly appreciate it. Yeah, that came out pretty decent. Okay, so it really wasn't, it could be a little tighter on the step over, but it's not too bad. But I'm using the V-carve along with everything else to make all that happen. So if any of you guys have any questions, by all means, please let me know. I'm going to step away from the computer here for a moment, and I'll be right back, and then we'll touch on any questions you guys might have. And I'll be right back. right, I am back. What you're seeing, Gordon, in the simulation is it is cutting down for those lettering. I know sometimes it can kind of be an optical illusion to make it look like they're raised because of the angle, because the V-carve itself. But yeah, they're definitely cutting out of the material. No problem. And if anybody has any other questions, just let us know. We'll be here for the next 30 minutes. If you guys don't have any questions or anything, thank you guys for coming. Really don't have anything else that we're going over today. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, let me know. We'll be here for a little while longer. Well, it doesn't look like we have any other questions, so I think I'm going to shut the meeting down for today. Thank you guys for joining us, and keep a lookout for new events that we have going on. If you're unaware, you can go to BobCAD.com, and on our main site, you should have the View Virtual Training Events, so you'll be able to see all the upcoming events that we have listed. You know, the sections it off for the mill training events, the mill turn, then the lathe. We are doing a couple of wire EDM events, some BobART events, Laser Plasma Water Jet, Rhino, and our SolidWorks plugin, which we have one for lathe this Thursday, I believe. So keep a lookout for events coming up in the future. We'll talk to you guys later.